people are happy, I think we'll probably get cracking. There'll be people that join us as we go anyway. So I think let's get started. And yeah, people can join as they come. So just a welcome really from us. I don't think Matt's here yet actually, but Matt and myself are project leads, co-leads for the AHP faculty, and we put this on today just as part of AHP Day. AHP Day. So happy AHP Day to everybody. A big thank you to everybody for taking part. So we've got some really good presenters today who are hopefully going to share their journeys into research with the aim to really inspire other people that if we can all get involved in research, then everyone else can as well. So just a big thank you. We will record it, so I said we'll share it at a later date for people that haven't been able to come. Please do just keep your microphones muted unless you're talking. Welcome just to raise your hand, pop something in the chat, whatever's easiest. We'll have a chance at the end to go through some Q&As. I was going to do breakout rooms, but I think the technology might have beaten me, so we might just have a general Q&A session with everybody in it, if that's okay. But yeah, so the agenda for today, so we've got quite short sessions from everybody. So we've got Ali starting off. We've got a range of different people. AHP is working in different stages of their research career in different kinds of roles. And then Vicky's going to go through and tell us a bit more about the regional opportunities that there are for everybody. So I'm not going to keep talking for long. I'm going to start straight away and I'm going to hand over to Ali to get us started, which does mean I need to find your slides, doesn't it, Ali? Hang on 2 seconds. Yes, so I was confidently thinking that I wasn't going to be running them, but I shall be running them. So, okay, let me just share. There you go. And just prod me when you want me to move on, please, Ali.
Will do. So hi everyone. So my name's Ali and I am a research physiotherapist currently working at the University of Exeter. So I've just got a few slides. I'm just going to talk through my journey into research and a little bit about some of the work I've been doing. So you can see here that I studied physiotherapy in Bristol at UE, qualifying in 2005. Then sort of did my rotations in Exeter before specialising quite early, I guess, into working in the community. So worked in the community in Exeter and then also in Torbay. Stayed with this team in Exeter and supported the setup of an urgent community response team and stayed with that team for quite a few years in its many forms. Sort of saw it getting bigger and bigger and more complex caseload, where I then became a clinical lead in that team before moving to a lead role in a community hospital ward. And then back in July 2022, I left my clinical role when I secured my first research post. Next slide, please. So as you can see, I worked in clinical practice in the NHS since qualifying, and like many of you, worked through COVID. And I think COVID sort of really opened up the possibility of remote working and kind of made it possible to think a bit outside the box about jobs and job roles that were accessible. And I think it was at that stage that I was really thinking of, I wanted a bit of a change and a way to impact care in a sort of different way, and started to explore whether the research environment would be a good way to do that. So I didn't have any previous research experience at this point, no sort of additional qualifications, and did assume that would be a barrier, but was sort of encouraged to apply and did secure post. So at that point, I was successful in securing a post on a project called Recovered, and discovered really that my sort of knowledge, my real life knowledge, experience, practical skills hold quite a lot of value in the research environment. The role was looking for a clinical mind to develop an intervention into something that would really work in practice. And I've really found that my clinical experience lets me give sort of real world examples of how to overcome difficulties that crop up in the research setting. And I've just listed there some sort of transferable skills, so things like time management, team working, coping with change, prioritization, and excellent communication skills. So all obviously really, really valuable in a clinical role, but also I think essential in any research position. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the role I initially secured at the university was on a project called Recovered. So this was a feasibility study testing an intervention aimed at supporting recovery from delirium. And on that, I worked really closely with an occupational therapist and a clinical psychologist. So some of the work we did together, so we developed the intervention, produced a manual, all the associated paperwork, patient-facing resources. We also worked with a PPI group. We're talking to them about the best way to share and present information. And early on in the role, one of my main tasks was producing a training package to inform the teams who would be delivering the intervention. And then as the trial progressed, it switched to sort of more a supporting role, so supporting those delivering the intervention with problem solving and running peer support groups and focus groups. My work has provided lots of opportunities to network and learn from others. I've attended a conference, contributed to writing a grant application, and I'm currently writing a paper focusing on the design and development of that intervention. And during my time on Recovered, I was also fortunate enough to work with teams on the development of 2 other interventions. So for 2 other trials, Maintain and then Chart, I was really able to take what I'd learnt on Recovered and use it in these projects. And have recently secured a new position on Chart as a researcher, where I will be out visiting patients at home, recruiting and completing baseline measures. And next slide. Here I've just linked a little piece of writing I did. So I wrote a piece for Frontline, the CSP's magazine last year, just about this topic really and my experience of moving into research. So if anyone wants to have a look. And I've also linked the CSP Research Network pages because I found them quite useful when I was considering the leap. So just to summarise, really, I was really apprehensive about moving away from clinical practice, but now I feel like everything I've learned, all the new skills and experience I've gained, would be of benefit if I chose to return to a clinical role, and also if I choose to stay and sort of develop my research career further. So there's loads of opportunities for AHPs to become involved in research, either alongside your job or as a new direction in your career. And I know Vicky's obviously going to talk about a few of those later. So yeah, just to summarise, if research is something you are interested in, then I would say go for it. And that is all from me.
Super, that's great. Thank you very much, Ali. Has anyone got a quick question just while I sort out the next slide? Has anyone got anything burning they'd like to ask at the moment?
And I will. Ali, how did you get over the intimidating thing of writing for your Frontline publication?
Don't know. It took a lot. It took a while. So there was a lot of definitely just looking at a blank page, thinking, what can I write? And also because that was a really short piece, it was hard to know what to focus it on. But I just wrote about my my experience and my feelings. I just try to think, oh, what would somebody else thinking about making that leap, what would they want to know? And that's, but it's definitely tricky to make the first steps. Yes, writing is hard, Vicky. Yeah.
My brother-in-law, he was writing a book recently, and he said he's a pediatrician, and he said he got going by using ChatGPT to give him a little bit of structure and to then go on and write it himself. But he said, I've never used ChatGPT. I wouldn't even know how to go about using it. But that's certainly something that a couple of people have mentioned, that it can give a bit of structure to then you can put yourself sort of all over it and give you some ideas.
Yeah.
I might have to try it myself.
Super. Ali, thank you very much. We'll have time to come back to Ali for other questions. If there's anything else you think of, we'll come back to that afterwards. I'm going to start sharing Kate's slides, if that's okay.
Great.
And Kate, I'll let you introduce yourself if that's okay.
Yep, so I'm Kate Taylor. I'm a dietitian based in Exeter, and I've been really fortunate to have 3 research awards alongside clinical practice in the last few years. So I'm just going to explore some of those with you and what I did with the time. And I think I just wanted to highlight right at the beginning that I remember being a student on placement and being told that research is something you do when you've got a really established career. But actually research was something I wanted to do from the beginning. It was an interest from my undergraduate studies. And so I qualified in 2018 as a dietitian, and in 2020 took up my first research award alongside clinical practice. So I just want to say research is for everyone to get involved with, so don't be held back by how long you've been practicing. Next slide, please. So in 2020, I was really fortunate and had an internship program with the NIHR and Health Education England. So this was for 6 months, and it was for 2 days a week. I managed to get backfill from my award. So just to say, these figures are slightly out of date. Obviously, it's 4 years later now, so you'll need to look up the figures for now. But I just wanted to share a little bit what I'd managed to do with that. And I think having clinical funding alongside, having clinical practice and trying to have research funding alongside, you really need support from your line manager. So yeah, I'm really thankful to my line manager that she's been able to look at finding backfill and release me each time I've got funding. So I think if you're thinking about this pathway, it's really important that you have your clinical lead on board to help you navigate a little bit. So with the internship, I had my 2 days a week. There's money to help you access learning about research. So in that time, I chose to do 2 master's modules in research methodology. So I did one in project design for research. This was during COVID. I didn't get to do a research project per se, but I used that to design an audit that I did in nutritional intake in community hospitals. So it really helped my clinical side as well. And I think that's the really important thing. With all the awards I've had, I've really seen how I've grown clinically as well. And it's those transferable skills that Alison talked about have gone between the two. So it's really handy having a foot in both camps. I also did a module on qualitative research, and I joined the Chief Research Fellows in Exeter just to access their training. I guess one thing I would say, it was quite full on. I was meant to be putting through an application for a pre-doctoral fellowship or putting it together, but actually with the time, I was using my own time and the time that I was awarded to just do the master's modules and the other bits of training I was doing. So it was quite jam-packed doing 2 modules. I also had mentorship as well from a clinical academic. So next slide, please. So I thought it's just really helpful for anyone thinking about going for these awards. That was my little breakdown 4 years ago of what I used the money for, and it was very much you put forward your idea of what you want to use that money for. So I think having support from a clinical supervisor as well really helps you navigate what you can use that budget for, but obviously most of it had gone on backfill at this time. So next slide. So then I had an IHR Clinical Research Network Research Associate funding for a year. So this was then for 1.5 days funding. And the idea is that you get the opportunity to be linked in with NIHR portfolio studies. You help them increase their recruitment rates while you're developing some skills. So it's much more practical. So there was no funding for learning per se through this in terms of doing a master's module or anything, but it was very much practical learning. And I really appreciated the opportunity. So I think it was a little bit difficult in that I don't feel that the CRN knew what to do with a dietitian. There isn't a lot of dietetic research going on, but Devon Partnership Trust were really kind and took me on because of my interest in working with older adults. And so I recruited for some studies that were going on with patients with dementia. So I think it was a really valuable experience just to see what it was like to follow a protocol and recruit patients on the other side of it, as it were. And it also gave me a little bit of time to put together a pre-doctoral fellowship application, which was my next funding. So next slide. So this was a little bit different in that I did do it for 12 months full time, and that was partly my clinical manager's choice because she'd found it so difficult to backfill little bits of time. So she asked for me to go full time for this for the year so that she stood a chance of backfilling a full-time job. But within that, I was allowed to take 20% time for clinical development. And actually, I really enjoyed it in that we used that time. So half a day a week I gave to clinical work, but I was supernumerary. So I got to do a whole new project. I went into care homes, which were not normally funded for, and ran a project and actually presented that at the British Geriatric Society, showing the work that dietitians could do in care homes around supplement prescribing. So that was really beneficial, and I wouldn't have been able to do that had I just been doing the more studying side of it. Yeah, again, I did some master's modules in clinical research, so one in systematic review, and I'm still writing a systematic review from that, but it gave me really good skills. And I also did assignment in quantitative research, which is in for publication at the moment. I've been able to publish some abstracts throughout and present at conferences, which has been really exciting, but nerve-wracking, but also exciting. And again, having supervision has been really important throughout. I think my only word of warning would be for the, so you have to, your funding either goes through your trust or through your university. And I did have a bit of a pitfall in that I put the money through the university at the time, and I lost a year of my service to NHS, and I think there was no need for that. It could have stayed. I think people generally know now that actually you can be paid through your clinical contract, and then the money for your supervision and your training can go to the university, just to save anybody else from those pitfalls. Next slide. And so that was it, really. I think in reflection, it's just been a real privilege to have time to think and read and network, which, yeah, has just been really important. And I think it, as I touched on, it has had a real impact on my clinical work as well. And I've been able to be much more research orientated and had all the training to do things like audits and think about what I've just presented at a conference for the work that I've done recently with my new clinical team. So I think, yeah, it's been really invaluable. Thank you.
Super. Thank you very much, Kate. Has anyone got a quick question before we move on to the next person? As I said, we will come back to everyone at the end anyway. Any quick questions? No, don't see any. Thank you very much, Kate. Much appreciated. And I'm going to move us on to Justine.
Thank you, Abby. So Hi everyone, my name is Justine Tansley. I'm a podiatrist. I work down in Torbay in South Devon. So I'm just going to kind of talk through my journey to sort of how I got to eventually become a PhD student. So I've only just started my fellowship just in the last couple of weeks, but it has been quite a long but a nice sort of exciting journey to get to this point. So yeah, next slide please, Abby. Okay, so in the very beginning, my research journey sort of started with a clinical problem. So that was sort of right back in 2015. And I had very little evidence available to me to help kind of solve this problem. So after sort of chatting to a few colleagues and someone who was involved in research, they recommended that perhaps I should consider going down the research route to gather that evidence and support me in getting maybe a little bit of evidence together to help me with that clinical problem. However, I kind of did consider that actually I'd graduated from university quite a few years previously, back in 1999, and I hadn't actually done anything more than kind of a level 6 study since then. So yeah, I had a bit of a journey ahead of me, and I had very little knowledge of research as well at that particular time. So thank you, Abby. The next slide. Okay, so this is the journey that I ended up taking to get sort of where I am now. So I started off with a nursing midwifery and AHP internship, which was funded by the NIHR Clinical Research Network in the Southwest. So I think it's already been previously mentioned, a similar sort of internship. So this was again 6 months with my local R&D department, which acted as a kind of a work experience, really, just to introduce me to kind of research process and just to kind of make me sure that this was the right sort of path for me to take, I suppose. But yeah, I was certainly didn't put me off, and I felt like it would be the right route for me. So the next step was to apply for an ICA fellowship. So again, an NIHR and Health Education England funded fellowship, which was for 6 months. And I was able to use this time to complete 2 master's modules initially. So I knew that I had to demonstrate that I could work at master's level. So I started on the Masters in Clinical Research as part of this fellowship. And it was also the time when I was first introduced to doing a PPIE project. So that then put me in good stead to apply for a pre-doctoral clinical academic fellowship. So again, funded by the NIHR. So that was 2 years in total. So I was able to complete my master's in clinical research, complete my dissertation, continue with my kind of project development, do lots more PPI work, do lots of dissemination work, attend conferences, write publications, that kind of thing. So yeah, so my research kind of skills and knowledge and career were kind of really sort of developing by this point. So at the end of the pre-doctoral fellowship, my plan was to then apply for the doctoral fellowship. But I don't think anybody's research journey is ever that kind of straightforward. So unfortunately, my application wasn't successful. And I think at the time, it seems like, you know, the end of the world. It seems quite devastating when you've been working on a project for so long, and you don't always sort of make it to the next milestone. So I had a year where I was kind of thinking, what could I do in that time to kind of, you know, improve my skills a little bit further? What was it that I needed to make it to that next step? So I actually took an opportunity to work as a research fellow managing a research project with the University of Brighton. So I took an 8-month career break from my clinical role and went to work in Brighton on a project funded by the UK Space Agency for 8 months. So I got that practical experience of project management and research delivery, which I think then went, you know, forward to, you know, really enhance my application when I reapplied for the doctoral fellowship earlier on this year. So yes, then fortunately, when I reapplied for the doctoral fellowship, I was successful the second time round. So thank you, Abby. Next slide. So this was how I went about finding all these opportunities that I've sort of taken over the last 9 years. So first of all, it was just about talking to my peers. So I was lucky that I had somebody who within my department who was already involved in research. So they were able to kind of signpost me in various different directions, introduce me to other people that I could talk to. So that was a really good place to start. And then sort of being, introducing myself to just the local R&D department where I work and the local clinical school, and chatting to the staff there to talk about opportunities to develop myself as a clinical researcher. But also my professional body. So within podiatry, the Royal College of Podiatry have an R&D committee. So introducing myself to them and getting to know them and being part of their research network has been really helpful, and also things like joining specialist research groups or clinical research groups has been really helpful to meet people, like-minded people, and learn about research opportunities. But I'd also sort of recommend just having a look online, at the NIHR website for opportunities, training opportunities, advice on PPIE projects and support, and following them on social media, because the opportunities are shared all the time. And then eventually, as you build up your research network, it's using those people within your network to help support you and introduce you to others. So that's kind of how I built the journey, the research journey along the way. So thank you, Abby. And yeah, that's it. That's my journey to becoming a PhD student.
Super, thank you very much. Any questions for Justine before we move to the next person? No? Okie dokie. We shall move on to Katie, who is a postdoctoral researcher. Katie, I'll let you introduce yourself if that's okay, and I will start showing your slides.
Thank you. Hello, yes, so I'm Katie. I'm a postdoctoral researcher in medical imaging at the University of Exeter, and I'm also a diagnostic radiographer. Next slide, please. So my journey into getting where I am now started with going to university as a mature student in 2009. To do diagnostic radiography. I didn't really think university was something someone like myself would be doing. No one in my family had been to university, and I was a single parent at the time. That's my daughter there in the photographs, getting progressively taller than me at each of my graduations. But I did that. I went and I did my diagnostic radiography undergrad. And following on from that, I really felt like I wanted to stay in education because I loved science and I loved the whole idea of going into research. Unfortunately, at the time, Exeter University didn't have much of a postgrad programme for radiography. It does now, just like to say, there's plenty of opportunities now for postgrad at Exeter. But at the time it didn't, and I fell into a master's in a subject called bioinformatics, which not everyone's heard of. Bioinformatics is also known as computational biology, using computers to make sense of big, large biological data sets, sequencing data and things like that. Anyway, so I stepped away from radiography a little bit just to stay and study and just stay and gain some other skills in other areas. Following on from that kind of led into a PhD. Again, I was at this point quite moving away from the area of medical imaging because my PhD was in biological sciences, looking at biotechnology, microbial communities. And I finished my PhD in 2018. Next slide, please. So following on from that, I got a job at Exeter University as a postdoctoral research fellow in bioinformatics. Again, I was quite still further away from medical imaging than I really wanted to be at this point. I ended up working with, again, microbial communities, biotechnology, this kind of stuff. And I worked there for a couple of years. And then a job came up as a senior data scientist with a company called Synisca, which is more of a biotech spin-out company from the University of Exeter, based over at the RILD on the hospital site in Exeter. And I worked there. We were working on, it felt I was moving back a little bit there to the area I wanted to get into because we were working on the genetics of cellular aging. So we were looking at certain conditions. We were looking at things like pulmonary fibrosis and heart disease and macular degeneration. We were looking at these kind of things, and we were looking at the genetics behind that. So I felt like I was moving slightly back into the area I wanted to get into there. So when a job came up in 2023 as a postdoctoral researcher in medical imaging at the University of Exeter, I jumped at the chance to go full circle and get back into kind of where I'd started from, with my boss, Professor Karen Knapp, was actually my undergraduate tutor when I was doing my undergrad. So full circle back working there within medical imaging. Next slide, please. So research in medical imaging as a postdoc it's quite broad. I do lots of different kind of areas I've been involved with, but one of the first things I did when I went back into working in medical imaging as a researcher, my boss was keen to kind of utilize those skills that I'd gained from those other areas I'd studied. So because I had this big knowledge now of data science, I was the person given all the big data sets that everybody wanted analysed. And the first thing we started doing, we look at a lot of things to do with osteoporosis in our department. So the first thing we did, I started looking at how osteoporosis services, DEXA services in particular, had been affected by COVID, and how the waiting list times had been affected, how osteoporosis medication rates had been affected over COVID. And it was really nice because we started seeing some of that work having real world impacts, because it formed part of an all-party parliamentary group meeting on osteoporosis services. So we started seeing our research straight away going into kind of policy making, and we had that one published as well this year. So that was one of the first big pieces of work I did. Next slide, please. But as I say, it's quite varied, so lots of other things. And in my department I work in medical imaging research, there's a whole host of all sorts of different research going on in all sorts of things which are related to medical imaging. And we work across with sports science, so with physiotherapists, things like that, other AHPs. It's quite multidisciplinary. Another piece of work I was involved in at the top there, that was looking at the bone mineral density across the distal radius, so that we could have a look at how that would affect DEXA scanning when you use the radius for those purposes. And we had that one published. That was a nice piece of work to get out. But it's quite nice. I've had the opportunity to gain some new skills as well in medical imaging. So at the moment, we're doing something called the phytoaging study. And for this one, I'm being trained up in ultrasound, because we're using ultrasound to look at the joints of the hand, to look at inflammation, then having an intervention, doing some more ultrasounds. So nice hands-on work there. And I've been involved in a project that looks at bone density of people after knee replacements. So we have people coming in. I've got trained up on DEXA, and having patients coming in and scanning them up to look at that bone mineral density of their knees is really nice. Having that patient contact again, because I spent quite a long time just working in front of computers. So working hands-on as a radiographer again has been really nice back in the department. Next slide, please. So as well as my own research, I've been trying to encourage other radiographers into research. So I know obviously here today we've got different AHPs, but obviously for radiographers in particular, which is my area, there's an NIHR incubator, which has been focusing on trying to look at ways of getting more radiographers into research, and trying to provide some resources to help with that. We sent out a survey we had 970 respondents, and that kind of highlighted that radiographers really want to be involved in research. There's a real keen interest out there, and they understand the importance of research, but a lot of radiographers don't know how to get into research. There's lots of barriers that they feel are there. So we've been trying to look at ways of enabling people to move into research easier. And we went and presented that work this year at UKIO, and had some good discussions with people about how radiographers and AHPs in general can start trying to break down those barriers to become more of a part of the research culture that goes on in England. So I'm just checking how long I've been talking. And next slide, please. I think that's everything. So thank you for listening. I feel like I've given a really fast whistle-stop tour of what I've been doing. But feel free to ask me any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Has anyone got a question for Katie at all? Go for it, Becky.
Might be a question to bring up later, but I feel like radiographers are one of the groups that we're not catching very well in trust at the minute. So I might I've written down your name and the incubator and stuff. I might be in touch afterwards if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like I say, I think that is quite true. I think the research that we did with radiographers and research, we did find, that there's such a huge proportion of the AHP world is radiographers, but they're so underrepresented in that research output. So yeah, feel free to grab me later.
Thank you, Katie. And I think we probably grab you from a faculty perspective as well. Again, see how we can engage more people in research from a faculty level in the system. So amazing. You've done an awful lot of work. It's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to move now on to Becky, who's going to talk about a slightly different role within research. I shall share your slides, Becky, and let you introduce yourself.
Thank you. Sorry. Okay, so yeah, I'm Becky. I am a physio, although my current role is the therapy and innovation lead in the therapy department, Northern Services end of the RUH Trust, so the Barnstable end. So although I'm a physio by background, my remit is for physio, OT, speech and language therapy and dietetics. Okay, thanks, Abby. So I started off from research. I was back in 2009. I'd been rotational physiotherapist, was looking for a slightly different challenge and saw an advert to go and support the trauma and orthopaedic surgeons at North Bristol Trust with their multi-centre research and running their research generally. So I was quite early on in the world of being a non-nurse in the research delivery world. There weren't many of us in the NHS in research delivery roles who weren't nurses at the time. So there was a lot of reaching out, getting support, building research into the MDT, or sat in on the MDT leadership meetings and things as the research presence, if you like. We grew fairly rapidly in the trauma research. We were delivering NIHR and commercial studies. I had exposure to some quite powerful research networks among the surgeons and the opportunity to meet people like Sally Lamb, who obviously it was a big and very rapid learning curve working sitting in on networks with people with that level of experience. What was particularly nice about this role is how closely I was integrated with the clinical team. So we were sat in the outpatient clinic, we were sitting in on the MDT meetings, and we were able to pick up questions that the clinicians were bringing to those MDT meetings around day-to-day practice and do evaluations and audits and surveys and things in response to that those questions coming up, which was where this publication on the bottom right hand corner came from. So from there we started building our own research as a team. Next one, please, Abby. So we were fortunate enough to work together as a team, me, myself, and a couple of the surgeons with and one of the physicians to write a research patient benefit grant that was successfully funded. We were looking at a drug therapy for hip fracture patients, but we were looking at measuring the outcomes with functional outcomes, which is where that MDT team of physician, surgeon and therapists really had its strength. By this point, I was deciding that part-time, that original fixed-term job in research, I was going to continue. I was enjoying it and enjoying the new challenges. So I became trial manager for that trial. So another whole different set of skills. So project management, coordinating the ethics approvals, building the database for bringing all the results back in from multi-center study, setting up sites and then monitoring. So research monitoring of those sites and the fidelity to the protocol. Within this, I then also became the qualitative researcher for this study. It was a feasibility study, so it was quite small, so I had multiple roles, and started a professional doctorate at UE in Bristol. So I completed the talk phase of the professional doctorate and then ended up cashing those modules in for a PG cert, because by this point I decided I wanted to do a more traditional PhD because I saw my career growing into research. So my PhD became around the recovery for those hip fracture patients and a longitudinal qualitative methodology, all looking towards how do we measure outcome, how should we be measuring outcome from hip fracture. That brought in a whole different world of experiences and knowledge base and learning around outcome measurement, the COMET initiative, which is the core outcome sets for research studies. And unfortunately, for many reasons, personal and project-based, I didn't actually complete that PhD. So that came out as an MPhil. And I think it's an interesting, if anyone's kind of trying to decide which route down the postgraduate education route they're interested, I'm very happy to share my experience of having tried out a professional doctorate and a traditional PhD. And as I'll talk to you all about later, I'm now on my second attempt at a PhD, doing it by publication. So I've collected a breadth of experience on different postgraduate education routes, if anyone's interested. Following this, what was interesting for me was that doing qualitative research methodology, longitudinal qualitative research methodologies, opened my eyes a little bit more to the systemic nature of our patients' journeys and how they go through the system. So I ended up working in community rehab, having been an acute-based physio prior to that clinically. And I ended up moving up to Yorkshire and working on an NHSE pilot study looking at admission prevention within community rehab services. Next slide, I think, Abby. And following my husband's job, ended up down in Devon and working on a bank role in community rehab, but also having met the leadership team here, using my skill base to support some evaluations and projects within therapies. Myself and our head of therapies then applied for some clinical research network funding to test out a pilot of having a clinical researching therapist. So 1 foot in the R&D department and 1 foot in therapies. So the emphasis on that role really was to boost and increase the amount of research going on within therapies, to get us involved in a few more multi-centre studies, to be a bit of a translator between the two departments, and support and hand-holding for the therapists that we wanted to work and run on those studies. And also kind of lift the presence of AHPs within research, because the research world was largely focused around doctors, nurses, and the supporting diagnostics and pharmacy and stuff. So the side of rehabilitation and therapies did not always have the highest profile. We had specific set of challenges over in Northern Devon in Barnstaple. We're the second, I think it's the second most rurally isolated acute site in the mainland UK. We're over an hour from our nearest university, which is Exeter, but our undergraduate courses for our therapy professions are down in Plymouth, so that's over 2 hours away. So there was no corridor conversations. You didn't bump into the professors in the corridors and things. So there was this kind of slight access gap for clinicians, just overcoming that slight nervousness to email someone or to know what the face of someone researching looked like. So part of the role was stepping in to do that. We wrote up the year's pilot, we took it up to an NIHR AHP event in London, and then I went on maternity leave. Abby, I think we're next slide. So while I've gone a bit ahead of myself, so while I was on maternity leave, there was obviously some conversations in the background, and a part-time permanent role as the lead for research and innovation in therapies was advertised in 2022. I was lucky enough to get it. And so I set about using this framework for thinking about how I placed and focused my endeavours within that role. So essentially, the job came out at the same time as the AHP National Research Strategy was being published, so that was able to give me some quite clear guidelines and focus on what I should be doing. But some of the frameworks, this is one example, there are more, which is talking about how you have to pitch things at multiple levels to really build research capacity and culture and build the skill base among the clinicians. So Abby, if you go on to the next slide, I think it's on the next one. This is an example based around that framework loosely of the kind of initiatives that I've been progressing within the trust. So basing things at individual levels, so talent spotting, coaching, mentoring, helping people get into contact with people in the right place, some team level stuff, so supporting teams to look at their practice in terms of evaluation, so supporting the methodology alongside QI and audit and service evaluations, some PPI work to help with developing the services. Sit within the leadership team within therapies, so there's a voice for the opportunities, there's a way of cascading information and acting as a link to all the HDIs and the NIHR stuff that's going on outside of the department. There is now a network for allied health professionals who have an institutional responsibility for research within the NHS setting, so I sit and kind of tap into some extremely experienced senior clinical academics from around the country to kind of get some support and ideas for how to progress things. We've got our first undergraduate research hybrid placement starting in January, which will be challenging and exciting to deliver. We've now got various clinicians using different types of funding and different pots of money, and all changing and contributing to that cultural kind of movement around continuous learning, continuous evaluation, and striving to get the best outcomes for our patients. That's a kind of example of some of the studies that we've been working on across the bottom there. And then, yeah, so what's next? One more slide. Sorry, I've probably gone over. So in terms of what's next, I'm currently doing a fellowship back with Exeter University. I am having a second attempt at a PhD by publication. I'm using some of the income generation of the projects that I've been able to get involved with to now create opportunities for more people to come and work with me. So we're building more skills and more of the department. That's going out to advert soon if there's anyone from IDUH on here. Obviously, the merger with Exeter has created some fantastic opportunities because we're now part of the clinical school with Plymouth University, which we weren't before the merger. But there's also some challenges because there isn't an equivalent of my post over in Exeter. So we've got to look at how we create these opportunities across the board and how we offer more support more widely. That's what the error on the slide there. Sorry about that. And then obviously I'm quite passionate about research. I am supporting the 4 professions within my remit in therapies, but I do feel like there's a gap for the other professions and that we've seen the impact this role makes. And I now would love to work out how we can pick that up across the other AHP professions within the trust. I think that's it. I'm going to be around for questions as well.
Thank you, Becky. Any quick questions for Becky now before we have more later?
Yeah, could I ask a good question?
Go for it.
Yeah, this is Bruce. Physio in the web cluster for Royal Devon. I just wanted to ask you, Rebecca, what if we as a team wanted to get involved in research? What's the best avenues to try?
Where do you start? There's lots. So one of the things that's worked really, really well with a lot of our teams is finding a multi-centre study that you can get involved with that's relevant to your patient group, because it's a really easy way to dip your toe in the water, very supported way to learn a bit more about it, get some experience of what it's like to put a protocol into practice in the real world, and then pull in on all the support from the R&D department that would come with that. The other thing that often the teams, when they're coming to us from a start, is up in the north in Barnstable, but I'm very happy to talk to you another time. We run what I call an innovation forum. So I get teams doing different types of service evaluations and projects to come and present how far they've got. The purpose of that is not so much to present the outcomes and talk about what a difference it made clinically, but to talk about the learning around the methodologies, how they approached it, what support they were able to draw on, and things like that. So I think there's normally someone around that's doing something that you can say, how did you do that? How did you get started? And pull on what is happening for other people.
Okay, yeah, and so looking at the multi-centre study, would that be looking on the NIHR website?
Yeah, there used to certainly be a search function, although my understanding is it's not as easy as it used to be to find those studies. Vicky's shaking her head. It's not as easy as it was, is it? But also just talk to the R&D department and let them know that you're interested, because when they get floods of emails with studies looking for sites to take part. So if they've got your name in your clinical area, they can keep an eye out for studies that might fit for you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more questions for Becky? No, you can always come back to questions. I think we have a bit of time at the end anyway, so we can always come back for more questions if anyone's got anything else that pops up. Thank you, Becky. That was really interesting. It's really interesting seeing working in a slightly different role as well. So thank you very much for sharing. I'm going to hand over to Vicky, who I hope has got your own slides. I don't think I've got them, so I'm hoping you're going to run them. So
yeah, because I'm a bad boss and I just don't follow the rules, so I apologise. I have got my own slides and I can share them myself.
Brilliant.
Can you see them?
Yeah, that's perfect. I'll let you introduce yourself if that's okay.
That's fine. Thanks, Abby. So I've been given a slightly different remit on what to talk to you about. I'm going to be talking to you about research opportunities across the region that may be of interest to you, but a little bit background. I'm a community physiotherapist by background. I'm an honorary community physio in Torbay, although don't have any time to do any clinical work anymore. But I'm currently Professor of Ageing and Rehabilitation at the University of Exeter. I'm based within the School for Primary Care and multiple other things. And interestingly, I noticed on Friday night, I texted Abby to tell her that I've either supervised or mentored all of the speakers today and Abby, other than Katie. Apologies to all of you. Katie, you've had a lucky escape. But yeah, Abby, Ali, Becky, Kate, and Justine, I've interfered in your careers little bits along the way. So it was actually really nice to see the really diverse speakers here today. Anyway, I'm going to talk about some opportunities that might come up about research, but I've only got 6 slides, I think, so loads of time for questions if my slides will actually move on myself. So one of my many hats that I have is for PennARC. Can I just get you to give a show of virtual hands if you haven't heard of PennARC? And please be honest, because it's fine. Oh, I haven't got any hands up. So everyone's heard of PennARC. You must be the first group. Oh, thank you, Bruce, for being honest as part of that. So a little bit about PennARC. So PennARC is funded by the National Institute of Health and Care Research. As you can see from the map, the ARCs, Applied Research Collaborations, covered the whole of England. NIHR doesn't have a remit in the devolved countries. And these applied research collaborations are there to bring together the academic institutions within a region, along with their health and social care partners across that region. So PennARC, i.e. the Southwest Peninsula, covers the 3 counties of Devon, Cornwall and Somerset. And as part of PennARC, we've got membership from the 2 universities, all of the NHS acute trusts, the community trusts, the partnership trusts, social enterprises for Live Well, plus the 3 local authorities across the region and those that are devolved, so Plymouth and Torbay as well, plus also some charities. So it is a proper collaboration across the region. And the aim is to try and bring together people from all of those institutions to ultimately improve the health and well-being of our local community across the Southwest. So we regularly get funding from NIHR for other things. So one of my other hats is I'm the Academic Career Development Lead for ARC across the region. And every now and again, NIHR throws us a bit more money to do some initiatives. So I've got some things that I'm going to tell you about a little bit more detail and other opportunities, but I can't cover absolutely everything that I would do. Otherwise, we'd still be here next week. So here are some of our ARC opportunities that we've had on offer. So the ones in blue are not currently open for new applications, but just to give you an idea of the sort of things that we offer that will be likely coming up in the near future, sort of in the next 18 months, when ARCs are due for renewal for another 5 years worth of funding. And we've been told that the budget will be increased a lot bigger than it ever has been. So we're going to be looking at more PhD opportunities available. We've also run internship program as well across the region, where we've had a range of, interestingly, all nurses were our previous interns. We didn't have any AHP applications. We've done postdoctoral fellowships for people working within dementia. And I was hoping to tell you about the knowledge mobilisation fellowships, but the closing date was midday today. So I had to change my slide slightly because I was thinking I might be able to nudge some of you to apply for that. But basically, they are aimed at people who are working in practice to look at trying to get evidence into practice, because we know that it takes many, many years from some research being published to actually it changing what we do in our clinical working lives. So these are a way to actually support people on how to get research into practice much more quickly. But there may be more opportunities coming up about those, which I can make sure Abby can share out amongst you all. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about our social care programme and some more regional funding. And I was hoping to tell you about the pre-application award funding in yellow, but we're still waiting to hear the outcome from NIHR. So there is a good potential in the near future for people who are looking to apply for an NIHR national fellowship, that there'll be some funding available to buy out your time to write that application and have a little bit of support from mentors, supervisors, and also some training. So again, watch this space. There will be more in the future, hopefully. So I know you're all AHPs and you're wondering, why would I be talking about social care capacity? Well, actually, we've recently launched our internship programme, looking around building research capacity in care homes, but also people within supported living. And actually, it isn't just people who work directly in those environments, so care home staff, but actually those professions that go and visit people in those settings. So as a community physio, I would go and visit people in care homes, in supported living. And actually one of our interns is actually another podiatrist who works with Justine. So we're really pleased to see this programme. So we met last week. For the internship, they get 30 days of backfill time. So we reimburse the employer, but they also get training and development opportunities, some funding to go to conferences, travel expenses. We do some in-house training with them as well, but they also get a dedicated mentor to work with and try and problem solve and actually get some exposure to what happens in the academic world in terms of research. So we're really pleased, and we're going to be opening a second cohort in the new year. So if anybody links with, works with older people within care homes or supported living and are looking to get a little taster for research. So these are aimed at people who really haven't had any exposure to research before. We did have an application for the first round with someone with a PhD, but that isn't really the spirit of what we're looking for. Internships are for people with no experience. But then we're also going to be advertising shortly some research champions. And they actually are people who are based in practice who are wanting to champion research. So it could be promoting, getting studies involved, getting involved in national studies that are in these settings, but also supporting their colleagues around learning how to read about research and understand research, maybe writing research summaries. So it could be running journal clubs and reading clubs, doing some little bits of training within their work environment to support them. So those are going to be coming out fairly shortly. And they're open to all professions working in those settings. But a couple of, I think, both Kate and Justine have mentioned these programs. Both of them had internships from the regional funding that was from Health Education England, so now NHS England, and NIHR, and these just came out in the last couple of weeks. I'll put the link in the chat and I'll send the slides to Abby so you can look at these. So these are pretty much the same as the internships that we're running through PENARC for social care. So this is open to people who are professionally registered as an AHP or nurse, or healthcare scientist, for example, and they give you up to 30 days of funding to use up to 12 months and to cover your salary, including your pension contributions, to actually do appropriate training and development. So you might do a master's module or go on a specific course to learn about research skills. So this isn't about developing your clinical skills. There'll be some funding to do patient public involvement activities as well and have the resources to be able to pay for that, and also have dedicated mentoring and supervision. So these are absolutely fabulous awards and clearly have a really great impact on people. So Kate's gone on and got a pre-doctoral award. Justine's got a doctoral award on the back of these. So these are a really good way of developing some skills and learning. So I'd really encourage you, if you're looking at getting your first steps into research, these are a really good way to find out if it's for you. So they are open until December. So you've got 2 months to pull together what's not a particularly difficult application, but it's worth having a look at these as well. But actually doing and leading your own research aren't the only opportunities, as we've heard here today. So there's a couple of other schemes that are available that may be really useful for you to get more involved in research delivery. So Becky mentioned finding out about different trials that are available, so you can get involved in maybe delivering an intervention or being a local principal investigator who's responsible for that local site on making sure that research is run appropriately and follows the protocol. So if you've not had any experience before, there's a scheme called the Associate Principal Investigator Scheme, where you'd work alongside an experienced local PI. Often these are the medics, but they don't have to be at all. And you'd actually get training and support to be able to take on being a PI under that sort of nurturing environment of a more experienced person. And the second opportunity is there's national funding available for a master's course in leading clinical research delivery. There's 3 courses around the UK. One of them just happens to be in Exeter, and but it's all run online. So it's a national programme, and you can do postgraduate certificate, postgraduate diploma, or a full master's. And these are often fully bursaried. So this year, right up to the closing date, they didn't manage to fill all their places and use up all the bursaries. So this is a great way to get master's level training in research and actually using that in the workplace. And it all leads it's fully credentialed through a national program, and it's all online, which makes it much more accessible. So if you're interested in sort of dipping your toe in a little bit more, these are opportunities that are freely available to you. And then there's national opportunities. Now, I'm not going to go through these at all because there basically isn't enough time. I could talk for days on this. So depending where you're at in your research career, there may be different levels of opportunities. So I highlighted 3 of them here, which I thought would be the main categories for yourselves coming today. So pre-doctoral level opportunities, there's a number of pre-doctoral awards, there's doctoral opportunities, and for people who already have a PhD, there are postdoctoral opportunities. These links will take you directly through to those. They're having a bit of a change around at the moment because it is quite complicated, and they're trying to simplify the process a little bit more because it can be a little bit overwhelming. But if you think that you might be suitable for one of these, I'd encourage you to have a think about it. They are highly competitive. So this is basically NIHR funding the creme de la creme. They're very hard to get. I've applied for 4, 5 fellowships over my career. I've got 1. So I think it's worth being realistic in all of these things. They're highly competitive, but massively rewarding and very valuable if you get them. And they're the envy of the world. There's nothing quite like this anywhere in the world where you get fully salaried to study. But on a slightly easier road, NIHR Academy has a load of YouTube recordings of webinars and seminars that they've run that could be around research leadership, around applying for different programs that I've just mentioned, all sorts of different things about doing public engagement. So it's a really great resource. You can dip in and dip out whenever you like. Finding some webinars that think for you. So great CPD opportunities, and also a good way if you're looking to put an application in to get some background learning as part of that. So again, encourage you to really engage with some of those opportunities. So I think that's my last slide. I mean, there was so much I could have talked about, but I've tried to keep it small and local, and hopefully given you some places where you can go and find out a little bit more information. And I noticed Claire has put something in the chat. Primary care AHPs would be a great group. Yes, no, absolutely. That's what we were trying to do when we advertised them the first time. We certainly got lots of interest from different people. It's trying to use groups like this to make sure we can try and share all those opportunities out there. It's there is no perfect system on getting out the information to everybody. I'm going to stop sharing my slides now. But yeah, please encourage you when we send them out again, please share amongst your colleagues and in PCNs and other things. any questions.
Thank you,
And
Vicky.
thank you. If anyone's works at Torbay, I am doing a talk in next month. I think it's the 19th of November, talking about my career and lessons I've learned along the way, and basically what's gone wrong in my career, because getting where I am has not been straightforward. It's been a higgledy-piggledy mess of ups and downs and backwards and forwards. And so, yeah, if you're interested in hearing about that, I think it's Rhoda Allison's organising it as part of some of your research things that are happening. So I'll be there in person on the 19th.
Thank you, Vicky. I think one of the things that people tell us that they struggle with is the number of opportunities and where to go to get advice about which is most suitable for them. Have you got any advice about what you'd say to them?
Oh, I think first thing I'd look at, I mean, that's why I've sort of on the slide put it into those 3 categories, sort of pre-doctoral, doctoral and postdoctoral. So you'll know where you are on that spectrum. Have a look at the guidance on the form, see if it's for you, if you're looking at applying for a national opportunity. Get in contact with NIHR. The staff at the NIHR Academy are incredibly helpful. There's often lots of local people around that sit on funding panels for these types of awards, and they're all the list of names of people and their institutions are always publicly available. So it's worth dropping people a friendly email and just saying, oh, I see you sit on that panel, I'm a local physio and I'm interested in applying, could I have a chat with you? And actually we're generally delighted to have people come and chat to us. So don't be afraid of stepping forwards. People don't like to sort of say, oh, but you're so busy, I don't want to bother. Well, you're all busy as well. So, but if you don't ask, you don't know.
I think what we wanted to show today was that everybody that presented has come into research in a very different way and different
Absolutely.
opportunities. And I think it's just really important we say that there are so many different ways to getting into research and to different extents as well. So yeah, I think there's lots of opportunities. Sorry, Katie, I didn't see your hand up.
That's okay. Hang on, let's take it down again. I don't know if this is so much a question or more of a comment actually on Vicky, what you were saying about research with care homes and that kind of area. That's fascinating. I worked in a care home as a care assistant for a year after my PhD, and it's an area that there's so much potential to bring the latest, evidence-based best kind of practice in. But it's such a bubble, isn't it, of trying to bring in that research. So the people working directly, especially your care assistants, your day-to-day care assistants, they don't have that access to it. And there's definitely a willingness and unwillingness to bring in certain changes. Have you managed to forge those links between your care assistants and your people who, can introduce that kind of best practice way of doing things? Does that make sense? It's kind of
no, absolutely. No, it does completely. So, I mean, it all came, the reason we focused on care homes for that particular internship program was because we'd already done a project called Exchange, which started right at the start of the pandemic. So all our plans to have researchers in residence went out of the window. So we had to change everything. But actually, we forged really strong links, academic links with care home managers, care home owners, care home staff, family members as well, to talk to them about research priorities, what was important to them. So it was very much engaged. We weren't going to them with, oh, we've got this new thing, we think you should implement it. It was very much actually starting with them thinking about research ideas, what were the problems, what were the solutions. And in our current internship program, we're going to be working with all of our interns to actually look at showing them how to find research. So where do you find research? How do you read that research? How do you understand it to know if it's going to be any use to you in your homes? But equally, we're going to be working with them to look at how they maybe use public engagement with sort of families and staff to actually improve services and do quality improvement works, but also to identify researchy questions that are important to them, that it may be that our current interns may be involved in moving forwards and driving that research. So we're coming at it from a number of different angles, because people have got a passion to improve things for their patients or the people that they work with, their residents. And so we're building on that. We want to get research into practice, but we also want to do research that's important to people, rather than, oh, I'm going to sit here in my ivory tower in Exeter and do all the things that I quite like, actually. And what a lot of care homes have said to us, they don't like people from the NHS coming in and telling them what to do, because actually they've got massive amounts of skills and knowledge, and how can they create solutions together, and actually as a partnership, rather than this hierarchical NHS here, social cares down here, which is really important to think about. So we're trying to address all of those things.
That's really interesting. Yeah, really interesting work. I'd love to learn more about what you're doing there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Vicky. Thank you, everybody. We've got about 15 minutes. We were going to go into breakout rooms, but I think it's just easier to have it as one group question and answer. Are there any questions for anybody? We've got 15 minutes, so please do make the most of the time. Any questions for anyone?
They're all very quiet.
Oh, apart from my dog. Sorry.
Can't hear him.
Matt, go for it.
Thanks, everyone. Really great presentations and really inspiring. I guess one of the questions I've got is something we've talked about in the faculty, is how do we kind of collate or share? There's so much good work going on, from doctoral, postdoctoral research to just really strong service evaluation and audit in organisation or in even individual team levels, that would be really good to like inspire our AHPs, thinking about it being AHP's day, but also just that kind of learning, spread and adopt. There may be people struggling with the same problems and challenges that may have already had kind of a more methodological look at, and how I'm waffling now, but I guess it's how do we share all of that good work? Thoughts, please.
I mean, you've got the basis of it here, as in people today. You've got a community of practice, and I guess it's for people to actively contribute to that in different ways, on either bringing problems or saying this is what I've done, things like that. But maybe that's a good way to do that. It clearly needs organisation and things like that to do it, because they tend to burn out a little bit if left to their own devices, I'll be honest.
I think we need to, as we're Devon, we are part of the Developing Research Skills Workforce project that NHSE have funded, and that has created masses of resources, and the website that's hosted by University of Plymouth, isn't it? So there's webinars and all sorts of stuff, and a conference in the spring. Ralph Hammond isn't here, so I'll say it for him because he's Somerset. So yeah, there's a conference in the spring, and the first one of those Developing Research Skilled Workforce conferences was massively inspirational with some really good speakers. So that's worth people looking. I can pop a link in the chat if people don't know what it is. Are there people who haven't heard about it? No one's saying they haven't. Hopefully that means the communications has worked.
I think it's just making sure that we as a Devon faculty and council, we share what things there are available, but it's always the communication that's quite tricky, because we can share things, but getting it to the frontline clinicians isn't always as easy as it perhaps may sound. So if there's ways that we can disseminate that information better and share it better, then obviously we're keen to do that. It's just we don't want to duplicate work that's already being done, I think, is key. But yeah, I think we're very open to ideas. So if people have got an idea of what we can do from a Devon perspective, please contact Matt or myself and let us know what might work, what would be useful. Yeah, I think we're open to ideas. Any other questions for anybody? I'm not seeing any hands up at all. So obviously, if anyone wants to connect with us, please do connect with Matt or myself from the faculty perspective. If you want to link with anybody else that's been today, please just let me know, and I can always link you up, and we can go from there. But thank you very much for attending. Really, really grateful for everyone presenting. I think it's just really interesting to see people's different careers and different journeys in research. But hopefully, it's shown that we can all get involved in research. It's just finding the right route for us. So thank you very much. Have a good rest of afternoon, and enjoy the rest of AHP Day. Okay, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Abby, I'll send you my slides.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That would be really good.